Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, 2012 Economic Insecurity Rates and the Basic Economic Security Table's Best Index, hosted by Wider Opportunities for Women. My name is Sarah Gonzalez-Bosinski, the Director of the Economic Security for Survivors Project, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Before we begin, I'd like to do just a little bit of housekeeping. Your lines have been muted to ensure that background noise does not interfere with today's presentation. If you have any technical problems, please feel free to use the chat icon located in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen to contact the WOW administrator. Following the presentation, we will open up the phone lines for any questions you may have. However, feel free to submit questions via the meeting chat function during the presentation, and I'll make sure that we direct them to our speakers. For those of you who are not familiar with us, Wider Opportunities for Women is a national research, advocacy, and technical assistance organization located in Washington, D.C. Our mission is to build pathways to economic security, independence, and equality of opportunity for women, families, and elders. Our work promotes policies and practices that increases job quality, improves gender equity, and empowers women economically. Today we are joined by Amanda Andari, the President and CEO of Wider Opportunities for Women, Sean McMahon, Vice President for Policy and Programs at WOW, and Christine Jagerberger, Vice President of Community Impact at United Way of Monmouth County, New Jersey. Our speakers will share the newest research and findings from WOW's work. Today's discussion will include commentary on why economic security measures matter, the definition and cost of basic economic security, findings on the relationship between insecurity in work, gender, race, and family composition, and use of economic insecurity rates and best data in advocacy, policy making, and services. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to Amanda Andari, who will talk more about WOW and these measures. Thank you, Amanda. You're still on mute, Amanda.
Good morning and welcome to Wider Opportunities for Women, WOW, release and discussion of our new National Economic Security Rates and Best Index basic expense data available for jurisdictions across the country. As Sarah stated, I'm Amanda Andari, the President and CEO of WOW. I'm proud of our 50-year history to not just talk about poverty, but provide research, advocacy, policy, and best practices in economic security and opportunity. For over 10 years, I worked in direct service, leading organizations committed to ending poverty and homelessness. Each year, we would ask ourselves, are we measuring the right things? Are we using the right data to make systemic change for people in need? The answer was often not really. We can't just talk about poverty anymore. We know year after year those numbers increase or don't change enough. Poverty, homelessness, and economic inequality are just symptoms of more systemic and systematic issues in our policy and practices. I know many of you on the call join me in wanting to end poverty. At WOW, we believe that can happen by talking about economic security for a lifetime. Living below the line, Economic Security and America's Families compares pre-tax incomes from 2007 through 2012 to Basic Economic Security Tables, BESS. Index basic needs budgets for more than 400 family types and finds that approximately 44% of Americans live on incomes that fail to provide basic economic security. This report identifies who, specifically within the U.S., is living without economic security incomes. It tells an important story about the contemporary value of work and the relationship between economic security and gender, race, ethnicity, family structure, and education. Not only does it tell the story, but it looks and measures comprehensively what families need to be economically secure, from housing to childcare, transportation, savings, and retirement. Our data is meant to inspire action and change the conversation. It is to equip advocates, policymakers, and elected officials with the tools they need to look at a comprehensive economic security agenda, such as the Women's Economic Security Agenda passed in Minnesota that WOW's research and best practices help to shape. We want this discussion to be the beginning of action that will understand what households currently living below and above federal poverty thresholds truly need to make ends meet, not fear poverty, and handle expected and unexpected events. Assess families and workers' abilities to create stable communities through their participation in local economies. Alleviate the immediate effects of economic insecurity of individuals, families, local economies, and the nation as a whole. inspire and help families to improve their own circumstances, institute policies that move workers and families toward lifelong and intergenerational economic security. I'm pleased to introduce Sean McMahon, Vice President for Policy and Programs at WOW, who will present our findings. Sean?
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning to everyone. So as Amanda alluded to, we here at WOW spend a lot of time thinking about economic security. When we first embarked on this journey to create the best and the associated products, we asked ourselves a simple question. So what is the nation's goal for those currently living in poverty? Clearly, the line between poverty and not poverty is blurry. And I use the term not poverty because we really don't have a proper vocabulary to talk about those who are living above the poverty line but who are still in need. Another question was, what is the aspirational goal for those who do not live in poverty but still lack genuine security? We know that millions of people cycle in and out of poverty during their lifetimes. And where do we want to move these people to? And how do we even think and speak about them? We know that we can talk about the middle class, but clearly that's really just a rhetorical device. We also know that many people who live a middle-class lifestyle do so through debt, and that doesn't increase security at all. We also know that the federal poverty level is archaic. It was first formulated using a multiple of the typical family's food expenses. It has become disconnected to modern reality, and so using any multiple of the federal poverty level is also out of touch with contemporary reality. So our response was to create the Basic Economic Security Tables Index, which enumerates and sums the basic expenses and savings that define economic security. And it's only those expenses that a family needs for health, safety, and work. It's a very basic standard of quality. I will enumerate the expenses in a moment, and as you'll see, there's really no frills at all. There's no entertainment, no restaurant meals, no vacations, no electronics, no new furniture, no sports for children, no Halloween costumes or Halloween candy, or gifts of any kind. And also, as Amanda alluded to, we have 420 different family types, all combinations of one or two adult workers, and we do assume that if there are two adults in the family, that they both work, with 0 to 6 children in 4 different age categories. The BEST index is calculated at the city, county, statewide, and national levels, which is also a distinguishing characteristic from something as simple as the federal poverty level. And we're also able to provide costs of expenses with and without employment-based benefits, including unemployment insurance, retirement, and employer-sponsored health insurance, which I think is a unique contribution. So here we have our first and simplest BEST index. This is the Basic Economic Security Tables for a worker with employment-based benefits. It is our United States value, and it lists the monthly expenses for one worker. The methodology of the BEST is quite complicated. There are many, many data sources, and so today I'm simply going to define these expenses as simply as possible. We have on the WOW website 2 reports that people can look into if they're more interested in the national methodology. One is called United States Methodology and Supplemental Data, and the other is the actual Basic Economic Security Tables for the United States report with which the methodology goes. The first expense we see here is housing. Housing is actually rent. We assume that all families in the BEST index are renters, and that they are paying the 40th percentile rent for their region. This is a measure that's produced by the Department of Housing and Urban Development in connection with their housing voucher programs. The utilities value also comes from data provided by HUD. Food is the low-cost food plan created by the USDA. Transportation is ownership of a small sedan, such as a Ford Fiesta or a Honda Civic, and it includes all expenses in operating and keeping up the car. It also includes depreciation, which many people forget is actually the largest expense when one owns a car. Next is child care. In this case, we do not have a child in the family, so child care is zero. However, we use the average child care expenses in the U.S. best data and some varying methodologies when we look at state and county values. Personal and household items is cleaning supplies for the home, basic hygiene materials, clothing, telephone, and a bit of life insurance. Healthcare, in this case, for a worker with employment-based benefits, is the employee portion of an insurance premium plus average out-of-pocket costs for their area. Emergency savings is a unique contribution to the field. We looked at, with our partners from the Center for Social Development at the University of Washington in St. Louis, what families actually save for. And we've included all four of the top reasons to save here in the index. Two of these we consider universally required. The first is emergency savings. And emergency savings is equal to the amount of saving per month that an individual must do to tide them over during a typical period of unemployment. The typical period of employment between jobs or at a single job is approximately 4 years. And before the Great Recession, the typical period of unemployment was actually 9 weeks. And so we use that basis to calculate an emergency savings monthly value. Now, during the Great Recession, unemployment 10 years went up greatly. In fact, at one point it was 27 weeks for a median, but we simply realized we couldn't expect families to save and to continue to maintain their lifestyle for that period. So we looked back in history and determined what was not anomalous and used that data. Retirement savings is the amount that an individual would need to save over 40 years of work each month, so that in combination with Social Security, the individual would have enough income to cover WOW's other budget standard, the Elder Index, which tells us how much seniors need in retirement to age in place and dignity, another measure that we produce at the national, state, and local levels. Then we move on to taxes. Taxes includes all federal, state, and local taxes. And incidentally, sales taxes is included in personal and household items. And then we have tax credits, all applicable tax credits at all levels. And that brings us to a monthly total, in this case of $2,541, an annual total of $30,492, and an hourly wage of $14.44. So that, for this individual, a typical person in the United States, is the price of economic security. Now, we actually have data now for all 50 states in the United States, and that includes all counties in those states and a selection of cities, and for some other jurisdictions, which I'll explain soon. The descriptive power of the United States best is not too strong because we're talking about a typical person in a nation of 300 million. So the closer we can get to the local level, the more descriptive power and the more accuracy these budgets can portray. At the bottom of this table, we have a category called additional asset building savings. We have children's higher education and home ownership. These are often part of the American dream. They can also contribute greatly to economic security, but they are not universally needed, and so we have not included them in what we call the core index. In this case, there's no children's higher education, but that value is the amount needed to save per month over 17 years if we were to send a child to first 2 years of the local community college and then the state university. It also assumes that children work an average amount during their school years. And then we have home ownership, the amount that an individual would need to save for 10 years to purchase a house at the 25th percentile locally, and assuming that they apply for a standard conforming loan, 20% down, this is the down payment that they are saving for, plus any fees involved in the purchase. So for the savings items, we've actually intentionally chosen longer periods of saving. This is an exploration of how much a family could save at minimum in many cases and still achieve what they need to achieve through their savings, including, for example, a, quote, decent standard of housing when they buy a home. So let's take a quick look at some other family types. We just looked at the values for one worker, and now we're going to add the values for one worker, one infant. And as you might imagine, the values for some of these expenses will increase, some of them a little, some of them significantly. And of course, we're now going to have child care. And so that we see the hourly wage per worker increases greatly. And so this basically is portraying the challenge that many single parents are facing in pursuing economic security. When we add another child, the increase proportionally is not as great, but it does increase an ever-increasing burden on the parent. In contrast, when we're talking about two workers without children, we of course can divide the necessary income among the two workers, and they do not have child care expenses. We do see, however, that their transportation cost is now their largest expense, significantly higher than their housing expense, and that's because in this case they need two automobiles. And when we add children to that family, the child care expense comes back, and we see that the two-worker family now has an hourly wage for economic security of $17.45. It's interesting to note that the hourly wage for two workers without children, $10.43, seems like it could be germane to discussions of minimum wage. So next we look at several jurisdictions across the country. Now that we have all 50 states' data, we can look at differences both interstate and intra-state. In this case, we've done a mix of cities and counties, and we found that the city in which one can purchase economic security for the lowest amount is actually Cincinnati, Ohio. It has a low housing value and a modest utility value. And in this case, we're talking about a city with a transportation system, which, though I'm sure imperfect, would allow at least the basic commuting and the couple trips per week for shopping or for medical purposes that we include in the in the BEST index. So their hourly wage then for economic security is $8.17. Again, this is one worker, no children, renting a one-bedroom apartment. That same economic security in DeSoto County, Florida, would cost that person $8.41. And in Cleveland, Ohio, it will cost them $9.04. So these values stand in stark contrast to Charles County, Maryland, Nantucket County, Massachusetts, and the city of Columbia, Maryland, which comprise our three highest values. So we can see the importance of differentiating geographically between our indices and how important they could be when we're talking about local circumstances and what kind of jobs people need, what kind of services that people need, etc. Okay, next we're going to look at a couple specific expenses. Here we're looking at geographic comparisons for housing, and we see that we have a very wide range. The lowest here is Talladega County, Alabama, followed by DeKalb County, Alabama, and Walker County, Alabama. In these cases, we have housing expenses for a one-bedroom apartment of about $300. And again, this stands in stark contrast to the three coastal California counties that are our three highest values. And that rent is reflected in the hourly wage required by these workers for economic security. Although housing differed greatly for these people, not all of the expenses differed. And so, although the rent here in the California counties is about 4 times plus the rent in Alabama, their hourly wages are not that disproportionate. We also notice a difference in home ownership expenses at the bottom of the table. Housing, in other words, rent expenses and home ownership savings requirements don't always move in concert, but they are certainly strongly correlated generally. Here we're looking at the difference in child care across the country. We have a little bit more geographic variance. Our lowest values are in Howard County and Greene County in Missouri and Arkansas, and Woodruff County. We can see that in this case we're talking about a family of 1 worker, 1 preschooler, and 1 school child. That stands in contrast to the values in Arlington County, Virginia, Loudoun County, Virginia, and Teton County, Wyoming, which is our highest value. At first, the Wyoming value might seem a bit curious until one goes to Wikipedia and finds out that Teton County is comprised mainly of Yellowstone National Park and Grand Teton National Park and has the highest median income of any place in the United States. So I just wanted to take a moment to mention that we have ventured into some additional jurisdictions beyond those for which we've produced values for all 50 states. Here's an example of a congressional district. This is Maryland's 4th, which WOW prepared for the office of Congresswoman Donna Edwards. And as mentioned earlier in the presentation, we can look specifically at the difference between employment-based benefits and those, of course, without those benefits. Healthcare in particular, emergency savings, and retirement savings are affected. Emergency savings can be affected because an individual may or may not have access to unemployment insurance, and therefore they need to save more in case they are unemployed going forward. We see that the annual total is quite different, approximately $6,000 per year, and that the hourly wage difference is about $1.70 per hour. Multiply that by 2 workers, and it's about $3.40. So access to these basic benefits can make a significant difference in people's lives. All of the data that we produced is available in WOW's Economic Security Database. It's available at www.basiceconomicsecurity.org. We'll have that address up at the end of the presentation, and is free for anybody to access. It provides data for both the BEST index and the aforementioned ELDER index, which provides basic needs budgets for those in retirement. And one can look at the data in different ways, comparing across counties and cities, looking at just one single jurisdiction or comparing family types in one jurisdiction. And here's an example of a table which compares workers with benefits and workers without benefits in a random selection of jurisdictions around the country. So there are many ways to use the BEST. This could be the subject of its own webinar, but I'll just briefly review some of the basic categories. It can be used in advocacy and funding, particularly to do media work, to demonstrate the actual level of need, to benchmark economic development, thinking about what kind of jobs are being developed. And of course, when it comes to state and local budgets, if not the federal budget, it can certainly be used to make arguments. In financial education, our partners often use this for goal setting with clients, or asset building education, or talking about debt management. Just as a benchmark itself, it helps define good jobs, as we'll see shortly. It can be used for program planning and program evaluation to demonstrate the impact of your programs. It can be used as an eligibility standard. And in case management outreach, we ourselves use this and our partners use this for career planning and pathways with clients, for client progress tracking, which our next speaker will talk to, and using this data to connect people to supports and to argue the nature of supports. So at this point, I will turn the presentation over to Ms. Christine Jagerberger of the United Way. Christine?
Thank you, Sean. Hello, everyone. And thank you so much for inviting us to be part of this webinar today. We are really excited to join you to talk about the work we're doing locally here around financial stability and how the BEST data is really helping us to achieve our goals. So again, I'm Christine Jagerberger with United Way of Monmouth County here in New Jersey. We are one of about 1,800 local United Ways around the globe. Each United Way is separate and independent, and locally our core work is focused on creating impact in three areas: education, income, and health. And today we're going to talk a little bit about our income work, which is specifically around addressing the economic security gap that we have in our community, and that's the gap between what people make and what it actually costs to live in our county. So Monmouth County, New Jersey, we're a pretty diverse community economically, demographically. We're a mix of rural, suburban, and urban environments. And so when we had to determine what we would focus on in income, we gathered a lot of research. You know, we conducted surveys, read reports, talked with our community. But a real key piece of data for us was the BEST data. And the reason for this was it really allowed us to have a localized look at economic security in our area. You know, it's not a national or regional state index. For us, we were able to really drill down to that local data and provide that really local portrait of how much it costs to live in Monmouth County. And I'm just going to share with you, just briefly, some of that local data here for you to see. And just a couple things I want to point out about this. Here you have two examples. You have a single household and basically a family of four. You know, and looking at the hourly wage, for example, you know, here in New Jersey, the minimum wage is $8.25. And when you look at the minimum wage for both of these household types, it's well above that average. You know, also for a family of four to be secure, they need over $80,000, and that's with employer-based benefits. I know one of the things BEST does is provide that comparison of employer-based benefits and without employer-based benefits, and we know that without the benefits, you know, the cost is much, much higher. And so one of the ways we've used the BEST, along with the research component, is really also around community education. When you look at that figure of over $80,000, that was something that was a little bit startling to people to really put that into terms of, you know, this is how much it actually costs a family of four to look at that economic security. And that's even without the additional asset building that they have listed, saving for college, saving for a home. And the other piece, too, that was really, I think, interesting to us and something that we've actually put into action that we'll talk about in just a moment is the high cost of child care. When you look at the family of four, the cost of child care is actually higher than the housing costs. And we often hear in terms of the conversation around poverty and security, the high cost of housing, which is certainly true in our community. But the high cost of child care, we find, is not as often discussed and really is a significant contributor to family security here. And so, again, with our goal being addressing that economic security gap, what we decided to do here locally was to implement the integrated financial stability model, which is a model people on the call may be familiar with. It's based off of the Annie E. Casey Center for Working Families, United Way Worldwide models, which have been around and have been very successful in other parts of the community, other parts of the nation. Essentially, it is a one-stop resource for people to gain access to a variety of services, and they're all aimed at helping households become more financially stable. We are still in the development stages of our local center. We are planning to be open within the next couple months in early winter of 2015. We're going to be located in a suburban mall in the retail part of the mall, so we're going to be right out center. We're really excited about that prime location and providing that access point for people to get services in a really neutral location where anyone would feel comfortable coming in to get services. Another piece of the model that we'll mention is it's a long-term commitment to clients, so we're looking at working with people over a long period of time to help them reach their economic security goals. And, the other thing I'll just point out, too, here is that when we were looking at who we were going to engage, in terms of our target population for this center, we are using the best standard in terms of, anyone who's under that line is struggling in our community. And so that we really expanded our definition of who we will work with. A lot of times people talk about target populations in terms of poverty and percentage of poverty. But what we're saying is we really are looking to work with and engage anyone that's really below that line looking to become more financially stable. And so what we're going to be doing is helping individuals create a pathway to economic security. And we're going to do this basically in two ways. We're going to look to find ways to increase income, which could be applying for benefits, free tax preparation, employment training. We're also going to look to ways to increase their financial capability, give people the tools and skills they need to be able to manage their money. It could be budgeting, financial education, and coaching. What you have before you see our core partners. These are our initial partners in this work. We are working all together to launch this centers, and you can see the different type of services that these partners are going to all be providing. And I just want to mention this is kind of our initial set of partners. Each of them bring with them their own expertise and capacity to do that, and we're certainly going to be looking to bring on additional partners to address additional areas as we implement this project. And so when you have a diverse group of agencies, coming together with different services that they provided, something that we needed to do was come up with a common goal that we could all focus on collectively. And the best data has really allowed us to have that common language when we talk about economic security and helping families to reach that line. So it really provides us that common definition, a common goal for us all to be working towards. It's a unifying framework, so to speak. And with that, common language, we have that common goal of moving families, creating those individual pathways for families to become more economically secure. So we are looking to have a common measurement system to be able to do that. And this is really where I think the best standard is really going to be something unique for us in terms of being able to benchmark client progress. So when someone comes into the center to work with us on a number of different things, you saw all the services that will be provided. they'll complete a basic intake process, and this is going to be information shared by all of our partners. And what we'll be able to do is essentially calculate a percentage of where a family is, a household is, in relation to that economic security line, in relation to that best standard. So what we can then see as we work with individuals over the long term, and they take advantage of different services, participate in different activities, their employment status changes, we can see how they progress over that pathway over a long period of time. And so it provides that benchmarking, for us in terms of measurement of success. We also see it as an education tool to be able to work with clients, to be able to show them where they are on their individual pathway and to develop services around them to be able to help them reach their goals. Budgeting, for example. The best standard provides those different line items, in a family budget, and that's definitely a tool we plan on using as an education in working with clients to be able to look at that and look at what they're spending and look at their costs. Ultimately we know that when we look at, a family of four and looking over $80,000, and we realize that even though not every client is going to be able to, say, reach that goal, what we are looking to do in a very, I think, inspirational, aspirational way for families is to give them the tools and help them move along that pathway. So we are increasing, their economic security, giving them the tools they need to be successful in the long term. So with that, thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to share, and I will turn it back over to Sean.
Okay, thank you, Christine. So we now have an index that tells us how much that families need to be secure, and we're now bringing it to specific families of all different characteristics. So we want to take a look at the actual number and the proportion of families that don't have economic security incomes. And this we call the economic insecurity rate. So we look at pre-tax income from 2007 through 2012. These are reported on the Census Bureau's American Community Survey. It has about 3 million responses per year, so it's a very large survey and provides a significant amount of accuracy and significance. Our main goal is basically to produce rates that are comparable in some way to federal poverty rates so that people will be thinking about economic security at least as much as they're thinking about poverty. And another goal is to examine the relationship, as Amanda alluded to, between economic security and gender, race, ethnicity, family structure, and education, if not additional characteristics that we haven't explored yet. So our first figure follows those economic insecurity rates over the years for adults, women, men, and children. And we can see, unsurprisingly, that the highest rates are found among children, and that these rates increase steadily between 2007 and 2011. It is notable that these rates increased actually more proportionally than poverty rates did during the period, and they increased more steadily. However, we see in this last year a very small downtick for most groups. For most groups, the change is about 1% on the verge of statistical significance. Next, of course, is women in terms of their economic insecurity rates, then adults, and then men. So we see for women the rate changed from about 35% to 42% and has declined about 1% or so. And for men, the initial rate was about 30%, climbed to about 37%, and then also declined a bit. Okay, and here we see economic security and insecurity rates. In other words, a proportion of people that fall above and below the economic security line for single adults by gender, race, and ethnicity. Unsurprisingly, the rates for all women is significantly higher. The insecurity rates are higher than for all men. We note that there is a significant gender gap for all three of the races or ethnicities that are listed here. The gap is smallest among white men and white women, and largest among Latino men and Latino women. It's also interesting to note that white women, black men, and Latino men all have somewhat similar insecurity rates, with black men having a higher rate than either white women or Latino men. Next, we see the same insecurity rates here by presence of children. In other words, the structure of the household. The first two bars on the left show all households with and without children, and we see that there's a 16-point difference there. It's not surprising, given the child care costs and other costs that we saw on the preceding slides, that having children in the household would increase the economic insecurity rate. But we were surprised, for example, when we saw the 77% rate for a single adult raising one or more children. The lowest rate, unsurprisingly, again, is for two adults with no children. That's the lowest rate we've seen in any of the demographic groups that we studied, and that's 22%. Okay, next we look at the security and insecurity rates by educational attainment. And what we see doesn't surprise us too much. We do see a gradual improvement in the insecurity rate as education increases. The rate for those with less than a high school diploma is a full 81%. It's very important to note that there are significant changes in the rate between the high school diploma, the some college no degree category, and the associate's degree category. There's a lot of talk in the media these days about the value of education. We think that this certainly demonstrates that attending post-secondary education is still of significant value. It's also important to note that those with bachelor's degrees and those with graduate degrees are not necessarily immune to insecurity. Just having a degree is not enough. It is often a requirement to have some sort of post-secondary education, but it's usually not sufficient in and of itself. Next, we see insecurity rates for women in their 5 largest occupations. One of the interesting things we can do with the BEST Index is to talk about current and future jobs, whether or not they will provide security, and what percentage of those doing those jobs have achieved some sort of security, and potentially how much security. Here we see that cashiers, unsurprisingly, have the highest insecurity rates. A particularly disturbing fact is the very high insecurity rate, 76% of home health aides. We know that this is a growing job in the country. It's a very important job for both our children and our elders, and it's frankly a bit disturbing how few of the people doing that important work are actually achieving some semblance of security. Also note that only one of these jobs actually requires a bachelor's degree. That's elementary and middle school teachers. Many of them still do not have security. And the best job in terms of salary is registered nurses, with 83% actually clearing the economic security line. So this is largely a story about employment. Yes, demographics are very important, but we note that among those who were working in our data sample, those who were above the BEST index actually worked an average of 42 hours per week. Those who were employed and were living below their BEST index were working an average of 37 hours per week. So it's not simply a matter of high unemployment. 1 in 5 households headed by someone with a 4-year degree is economically insecure, and more than 3 in 10 women who work full-time do not earn enough to be secure. So we can use these economic insecurity rates to do many things. Some of them include assessing local need and security, and as we often talk about, stability, because families that lack economic security, when they are concentrated locally, that is not a community that we can necessarily refer to as secure or stable. You can use it to demonstrate, argue, and publicize local need, to track change over time, and even project future years. This is of particular interest as we are an aging society. And we can use it to, in our programs, in our work, plan education options, to plan our programs, to think about, if not plan, support services geographically and otherwise. So all of this data is available in our new report, Living Below the Line, Economic Insecurity in America's Families. We have much more data in the actual report, and in fact we have some data that's not included in the report itself, so we welcome contact from anybody who's particularly interested in either specific populations or general insecurity rates. Just to put a plug in very quickly, we also have an economic security scorecard that looks at the type of policy that ultimately results in higher or lower insecurity rates. That's also available on our website, so check out the scores for your state in our Economic Security Institute. Each of your states has a state page where we summarize the grades. As I mentioned before, this data is available on economic security at the Economic Security Database, basiceconomicsecurity.org. There's a lot more material on our website, and here is also the URL of the United Way of Monmouth County website, so you can check out all the great things that they're doing there. So now we will take some questions. So I'm going to turn it back over to our moderator, Sarah.
Thank you, Sean, Amanda, and Christine. I hope that you all found this presentation very helpful. I know it's full of a lot of great information, and I'm sure there are a number of questions you may have. So there are a couple of ways you can ask questions. First, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there is the meeting chats box. It's a little dialog box at the very, very bottom. So feel free to type in any questions there and direct it towards the WOW administrator, and we will answer those questions. For those of you on the phone, you will need to dial *1 to ask any questions. So I'll give you just a moment to unmute yourself or type in a question. And okay, great. I see a couple coming in now. First question is, how can I obtain comparison data for my state?
Well, WOW will be actually producing and releasing additional research, primarily in the form of a brief that provides more comparison data generally across the country. If you're interested in specific comparisons for your state, please contact us. We have not performed the comparisons within states yet. We have all of the state best index data and elder index data available through the database. But comparisons have yet to be done, but we would be happy to talk to people about that.
Okay, great. Another question asks, can you address how this impacts Hispanic people in particular?
Okay. Christine, would you like to address that, or shall I?
Well, I mean, I can add from our local perspective. We are making sure that the services that we provide are going to be available in Spanish so that we don't have a language barrier in people accessing services. So, from the implementation standpoint, that's something we know, and the community where we're going to be locating the services has a very high Latino population. So that is something we are incorporating into our planning.
Okay. And I would say briefly that first, starting with the best index, these budgets can actually be adjusted some to reflect local circumstances. Also, as we can see, the insecurity rates among Hispanics are notably higher than for other groups. I think that sort of information needs to be publicized, and it needs to be tracked. We do track poverty rates. That tells us something about how Hispanics are doing, particularly on the national level or in states where they live disproportionately. But if we want to think about improving the lives of the, quote, Hispanic population, we need to understand actually where they are now, and we need to understand how their actual insecurity rates are changing over time, not just whether or not they're living in abject poverty.
Okay, great. We've got a few more questions, and I'll try to get through them all. Another one, Sean, you had mentioned that state and local governments can use this data in their budgeting. Maybe you and Christine can both talk about how, what examples you have for this.
Well, just generally, these data basically describe what's actually happening on the ground. So it's a good indicator of, number one, the need for policy responses, and number two, the actual impact or lack of impact of policy responses. So it may be that the local issue is more a matter of jobs and wages and employment, and therefore about workforce development and workforce development funding, or it may be a matter of food insecurity, and so we may be increasing people's economic security rates by improving the budgeting for food-related programs. So the data itself, obviously, is just a starting point. People have to take this and apply it at the local level to, again, understand what's going on and determine for themselves how they would most like to increase security, right? Which of the many pieces of the puzzle that are explicit in the budget or suggested by the Elder Index budget they want to address. And eventually, if we address enough of those pieces, and obviously that's going to impact local budget, we can improve people's insecurity rates. We can also think about this geographically as well. This will help people understand what's going on in different parts of a state, and it can be tailored even to better understand what's going on inside different parts of a city.
Christine, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think just in terms of policy for us locally, what we have found very useful with the best data is, again, that community education piece. We find that, especially when just talking to the public in general and just educating them on what it actually costs to live in our community, that's a very powerful conversation. And when they actually look at the data, it's something that I think is extremely helpful in terms of the conversation.
Great, thanks. So there's another question asking, are there any states that are doing really poorly in terms of their economic insecurity rates, and has there been a response from legislature to, use this data in terms of their policy making? A little tricky one, so I'm not sure if we know how, to the extent of its use. But Sean, do you have any sense of that?
Well, we have yet to actually calculate insecurity rates for states. What we've looked at today is actually the national data. So that's the next step in the project. I can briefly refer to something similar we're doing on the other side with our Elder Index, which is very similar to the BEST. This is currently being used in more than one state where we have talked to legislators about the current economic insecurity rates among seniors and have testified before lawmakers and have actually worked on specific pieces of legislation. Right now there's also a committee on the economic security of seniors in Massachusetts that WOW, with our state partner, the Massachusetts Association of Older Americans, we're largely responsible for helping to put in place. So we have done this on the elder side already, but we have not used economic insecurity rates on the family side yet. But that's something we hope to do in the future.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions? I'll give you a moment to go ahead and pose those in the chat box. Okay, if not, that concludes today's webinar. We will be making this presentation available on our website, and we'll email you the links to the recording so you can follow up and get this great information once again. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to email me directly. My email address is sbocinski@wowonline.org. We want to thank our presenters once again, Sean, Christine, and Amanda, for sharing this wonderful information and your work. We hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.